Hi everybody, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a player for a Call of Cthulhu game that doesn't like the aspect of another player playing a black character. A story about a dungeon master that thinks a player should put a game of Dungeons & Dragons over their dying parent, and much more. But first, if you would like to help a Doge out, I hope you consider liking and sharing the video, leaving a comment, and subscribing. If not for me, then how about for Simba in the tiny box? I swear, he'll sit in there for an hour. But with that said, let's get into some DnD horror stories. Quote, "That's just how it was back then," by Reddit user Keeper Forever. Or, alternate title, "Not being racist is ruining my immersion." We were about 6 months into it, and our regular game master needed a break from being on Zoom due to a very busy work schedule. So, I offered to run a Call of Cthulhu mini-campaign in the interim. Since we were down a player, one of the group brought in problem. Spoiler alert. And another player dropped due to a new baby. So I brought in Smuggler, a distant friend who I reconnected with thanks to lockdown. Second spoiler, Smuggler is African American. All seemed great. I had played with Problem before, and he was a decent player. A good role player, but a little over the top with a bit of main character syndrome, but nothing I couldn't handle. Session 0 was great. Everyone seemed to click, and Smuggler had a great character concept. His grandfather smuggled escaped slaves via sea, then made his family fortune gun running during the Civil War. His grandfather was no longer in public life and was rumored to own a slew of rum runners off the coast of Arkham. Oh, and despite being nearly 100 years old, he didn't look a day over 50. Side note, when you find players who give you background hooks like these, keep and nurture them. After Session 0, Problem called me to ask if Smuggler's character was going to be, quote, "Well, you know." No, I don't know. Enlighten me. His concern was that, as Smuggler's character is also black, it would make the game extremely difficult given the racism of the 1920s. And they wouldn't be able to investigate anything as a group. In addition, Smuggler had a high credit rating. In Call of Cthulhu, that's a skill that combines your income, social status, and influence. And there's, quote, "no way a person of color would have that higher rating." Sadly, due to my gaming friendship with Smuggler, this was not the first time I've had this discussion. I explained that we are playing a fantasy game. This means we as players get to make the game what we want of it. And, as the keeper, I'm choosing not to explore racism as a thematic element in this campaign. We're here to stop cosmic horrors, not deal with everyday horrors, especially ones Smuggler already knows all too well. But the dude could not let it go. This turned into an hour-plus phone call while I was making dinner, where he very earnestly and diligently needed to explain racism to me. Now, this dude is as West Coast progressive as can be, and yet he could not get unstuck and decouple what the 1920s were really like, and a silly game we all wanted to play. I kept coming back to my argument that both things can be true. The historical era was crappy for anyone not white and rich. And we can play a game that doesn't need to be historically accurate, according to his views. It was insane how fixed he was on what's, quote, right, and how having a black character in Call of Cthulhu would make things harder for the other investigators. It really soured my desire to run this game, so I decided to pivot and run an alien RPG mini-campaign instead. The best part, for me at least, was that, as far as I know, nobody else ever heard about Problem's issues with Smuggler's character. And in-game, Problem ended up playing the company man, who died a horrible death at the hands of the other players. Sometimes, the universe has a way of working itself out. OP is right. Just because they were going to be playing a game that takes place in the 1920s, it doesn't mean that they needed to include racism as a theme. It's a game where you fight tentacle monsters and such. I mean, you can include themes like that if you want, and have it be part of the story. But in the end, the players decide what they want to play. And problem players stating that there's no way Smuggler's character would have that high credit skill is kind of racist. There were plenty of affluent black people in the 1920s. Would they have still faced racism back then? Most likely. But that doesn't mean that there weren't wealthy black people back then. I just don't understand why some people hyper-focus on race. Like, just get together and play a fun game. It is a shame that this caused OP to not want to run the game, as it seemed like OP really liked Smuggler's character concept, but I guess they at least got to play Alien. Speaking of which, I still got to talk to my group about playing that sometime, as that is a game that I am highly interested in. Let's move on. Player turned Dungeon Master changes world to nerf my character. By Reddit user GandhiGun1. So I, a 35-year-old male, am a bit of a forever DM, and a longtime player of mine, who we'll call Jim, a 32-year-old male, wanted to Dungeon Master and let me play for a change. Between sessions, I would often discuss fun or powerful character combinations, so it was very cool to get to play something. He built a full homebrew world and gave us all the setting notes. It was a low magic world, and this will be important later. I sent Jim notes for the character build I was planning, as I don't like it when players try to quote, pull one over on the Dungeon Master. It was a barbarian warlock, with plans to use Armor of Agathis and Rage for a spiky boy, eventually taking Pact of the Blade to get a hold of a magic weapon. Jim had made some comment to the effect of, "I'm watching out for your broken characters," but I didn't have much interest in maximum number builds, and told him that I'd keep him posted on the build idea. A few sessions in, we settle into a city where we would spend the next 10 to 12 sessions. In the first fight, I cast Armor of Agathis, and then bonus action to go Rage. Jim calls for a Charisma save, which I failed, and it was Calm Emotions. I figured there was a hidden spellcaster, and I joked, "Hidden caster? That would make me so mad, but I literally can't be, haha." Internally, I was a bit annoyed, as it seemed oddly targeted against a first encounter with these enemies. An archer knocks out the 5 HP on Armor of Agathis, and the next turn, I just go for my other Rage. But there was a Charisma save again. This time, it is revealed to be a crystal above the door to the building that we were trying to get into. The low magic world now had automatic calm emotion turrets all over the city. A few sessions later, I finally passed my initial save, just to find out that they fire off every round. We had a one-on-one chat about the situation, but Jim said that he was going to keep nerfing us as a way to make things challenging. I tried to make the point that the archer dealing with disadvantage from high winds for one fight was an interesting hurdle, and calm emotions from a stealthy mage would have been neat, as taking them out would be a cool part of the quest. But just turning off my main class feature every fight was not fun for me. He seemed to kind of understand, but held firm that it was how he was going to do things. I asked to change my build or character, which he was willing to accommodate. Sadly though, schedules and life stuff meant that I had to fully drop out. Man, for a player that wanted to run a game so his forever DM could get a chance to play, he really made it not fun for OP, huh? Having things all over the world that would negate his main class feature is kind of BS. And saying that he did it to make things more challenging for all players, and using one instance of high wind giving an archer disadvantage is BS. You would think that this DM would listen to OP, since he was running the game basically so OP could play. But he wouldn't budge. I wonder what other BS things he would have put into the world when OP would have changed classes. But alas, OP never got to find out. Because life. On to the next one. Dungeon Master tried to make me choose between D&D and a terminally ill parent. By Reddit user 3Away. I know this is a dramatic title, but that's the TLDR. Gonna need a vibe check, as I also suck in this one. And for the skeptics that think this is a fake story, I'm happy to confirm with mods that it really happened. There's slightly more to the story, but I'm trying to leave out some of the more identifying details and keep things vague for anonymity's sake, you know? New to Reddit, so sorry for any mistakes. So, a while back, I was in a D&D group with some work buddies. Me, my best friend, and the best friend's partner who was the DM, along with another very close friend, are the only ones really relevant in this dumbass hell. We'd all been playing D&D together for a few years after I had introduced best friend and partner to the hobby, with the close friend being the initial DM. Eventually, they got burnt out due to in-real-life problems, including a death in the family, and needed a break from dungeon mastering. Enter partner, who wanted to try out DMing for the first time. That was fun. The campaign was going well, and in-jokes were established. Close friend and DM established an agreement that DM could try out DMing for a while, but close friend would like to return to the DM's chair one day. I'm not going to lie, this naming convention is a bit confusing, but let's continue. Then, one of my parents was diagnosed with terminal cancer. As the cancer progressed, I ended up needing to skip sessions to stay at my parents' to help look after the family, as you do. Everyone at the table knew what I was going through. However, I admittedly wasn't the best at informing whether or not I'd be able to make it to a session. Sometimes only knowing that I was needed back home and having to back out of D&D the night before. This frustrated the DM more than I realized. In other groups, everyone was more than understanding of my circumstances, so I assumed this group wasn't any different. I was wrong. The crap first hit the fan when close friend had recovered from burnout and wanted to resume DMing, though DM said no. Close friend tried to offer their usual compromises, alternating weeks or months of who was the DM till this campaign was done. Still, no. The DM said that once we had finished this module, they wanted to do a full campaign. It was clear that DM did not want to get out of the chair now. On the sidelines, me and best friend agreed the whole fight was effing dumb. The people in my other group, who had 2 regular DMs that took turns running games, agreed that it was dumb. Yeah, it's pretty selfish, if you ask me. Plus, what gave the new DM veto power over the group having the previous DM run some games? The next thing I knew, DM had private messaged me, suggesting that I could go ahead and leave the group, as I had missed so many sessions to play in another group, which wasn't what was going on at all. I re-explained to DM how the other group wasn't why I was missing sessions, and that I was sorry for missing so many in the last few months. But you know, terminally ill parent. The previous week, I had needed to back out of the planned session due to said terminally ill parent needing an emergency hospital visit, which I had explained immediately. DM had cancelled that session due to 2 out of 6 players not being able to make it, with the idea of a social contract coming into effect, which sounded almost like a threat. I'd never even heard of a social contract before this shit show. Neither have I. What the heck is a social contract? Close friend was anxious about how DM was suddenly treating him. I was upset and getting mad because no matter how much I tried to get across that I was sorry for not being able to play a game that I usually adored, and that it was solely due to needing to care for a very, very sick family member, and that I was worried about how controlling the DM was suddenly getting. At that point in my life, I simply had higher priorities than D&D, and it felt like I was being punished for it. And it was frustrating that the DM seemed focused on, quote, the other group being a problem, not my family's troubles. Yeah, talk about being cold-hearted. DM doubled down, stating that for the next campaign, they'd be making players stick to the schedule, and that if players couldn't make it due to wanting to be in another group instead, they didn't want them at the table because there were others willing and able to play. DM wanted the players there, ready and prepared. They were frustrated with me, and despite acknowledging my situation, seemed hyper-focused on the idea that I was playing at a different table, rather than waking up throughout the night to clean up the mess from a misaligned catheter tube spilling everywhere, and watching someone I loved so dearly becoming a frail, sickly shell of their old self. I was speaking, and DM wasn't listening. They'd already made up their mind. I was in no mood for BS or further arguing that it felt like I was being accused of cheating in a relationship. I wasn't going to be forced into making a choice between either group when I knew full well that's not how D&D works. I've been able to play multiple different campaigns and homebrew with multiple different groups without any problem, aside from the occasional scheduling issues. I made it clear that there were more important things to me than rolling dice at a table right now. I did not appreciate being pushed to make a choice about which game to play in, or be lectured about DM's expectations going forward. If there were other people wanting to play, then that's great, but I wouldn't be one of them. Due to working with Best Friend, who is DM's partner, the resulting silent treatment from them and another work buddy, who, as far as I know, still plays with them, was not what I needed. I never went to another session of that DM's game. Close Friend also left that game. I no longer speak to DM, or former Best Friend, which sucks because I still work with former Best Friend, and over a year since the dumbass falling out, we barely speak. I'm not sure if we'll ever recover the friendship we had. It hurts too much. I know my trust is gone. I don't think I want someone in my life who treats me so coldly when they know what I'm going through, knew what I was going through. My dying parent passed away just over a year ago, perhaps 3 months after the argument, peacefully and surrounded by family. Close Friend has started a new prequel campaign to the old one, with some returning and some new players, with the plan of either going back to the old characters or continuing with the current ones once the timelines catch up. DM made that social contract for his new group, and most of the rules are standard, reasonable requests. There weren't 44 of them, before anyone asks. I refuse to be told what to do regarding my hobbies and/or spending precious time with loved ones. It hurts losing friends so abruptly over something as stupid as a D&D game, but it wasn't really about the D&D. I know I could have done better about communicating. We all could have. I regret some of the things I said to DM while I was so mad and upset. I could have been better about session attendance and making sure I was prepared to play when I was able to attend. But I don't know. I'm venting this here to try and get it off of my mind once and for all. If this story or any details within sound oddly familiar to any particular readers, no, they don't. Or hey, chime in with your version of events. I'd love to hear them after a year of radio silence. Man, talk about a bunch of dicks. OP has nothing to be sorry for. I mean, they were dealing with one of the most difficult things someone can go through. And trust me, I know. As some of you who follow me on Twitter know, I am currently going through the same thing with my dad. He was diagnosed with stage 4 mouth and throat cancer back in September, and in recent weeks, his condition has gotten much worse in a very short amount of time, and he is now in hospice care. And I won't lie, I had to pause recording the story multiple times to step away because it all just got too heavy and I had to regain my composure. I guess I wanted to cover the story as some sort of catharsis. I don't know. Luckily though, this channel is my primary source of income, so I am able to stay at home and take care of him. And my brother works from home as well. As I know a lot of people that are going through what we are don't have that luxury. I am just lucky enough to have a D&D group that understands what I'm going through. And even when I had to cancel attending our session on Friday due to my dad switching hospice providers and the clusterfuck that came with that, they fully understood and just postponed to next week. Now, it is a bit easier for me to attend D&D sessions as we play online, but still, my group fully has my back. It's really messed up for OP's group to not be understanding that family will always be more important than a make-believe role-playing game, and then to basically not talk to OP for over a year because of the whole thing. So, I give OP my condolences, and I'm happy to hear that they were able to get back into the game with their other friend. Now, I don't know about you, but I know I definitely need a kitty after that story. There, that is a little better. Let's move on. That Time They Left the Tavern by Reddit user Equivalent Wrangler 27. Not the worst story, but I think most dungeon masters usually have one like it. I prepped a game for a group of newbies when I was a newbie myself. I had them meet at a tavern, as you do, but I wanted to make sure they had a lot of options. I described the scene as well as I could. There was a barman pouring out free drinks to people who told him stories or jokes. A group of strong young men were having an arm wrestling competition with a golden prize. A stage was set up, and a group of bards were looking for their lost lute player. A shady man in the corner messed with something beneath his cloak, and a tavern maid was crying by the cellar. Out of the 3 players, 2 chose to look for an empty seat and wait to be served, while the other player declared, "I'm gonna go back outside and look for a dragon." They eventually all joined the dragon hunter, and I improvised the rest. I was still bummed that none of them pulled at any of my plot hooks that I'd laid out, but what you gonna do? Yeah, that sounds like that could have been a bit disappointing. But as it sounds, everyone, including OP, were new to D&D. It is okay to tell the players above table that you set up these different plot hooks that would take them on different adventures, especially when you are new, and at the beginning of a campaign. Though it does make me wonder, how did they miss those obvious plot hooks, even if they were new? I don't know. Let's move on. Out of character player worse than their in character. Need advice. By Reddit user That Weird Quiet Kid. I joined this D&D group about 2 years ago when my friend wanted a dungeon master. My DM got together a group of their friends and introduced us all because we had never met before. And then we were a party. All of us, except that one player, who I will call X, were new players who had never been exposed to anything Dungeons & Dragons before. X had played in their past, and that's all I know, really. We're on our second campaign together, with a somewhat rocky first one. X, a lot of the time, would bash myself and the others for not knowing some of the mechanics of D&D. But then again, this was our first time playing. One of those players that think they are so much better than the others just because they are new. So, one of the worst kind of players. A lot of the time, I would ask for clarification on what to add for roles, or where to write things down on the character sheet, and X would get annoyed when we asked. In Campaign 1, X's first campaign character would do all the talking, and I mean all the talking, and even on one occasion told the Dungeon Master that they wished we participated more because they, quote, had to do all the work. Something tells me that X wouldn't even give the other players a chance to talk. In our second campaign, and our current one, X has really mellowed out. Their character, that is. The other players and I have been able to happily interact with the NPCs. That could be because we're more comfortable with the game mechanics, or just having the space to actually speak. Even X's character would have really good and sweet reactions with my character. Though, X out of character would make remarks about us or our character's actions. For example, I had asked to make a perception check for traps in a building where the last 3 encounters were in that building. X proceeds to say that I'm stupid for thinking that there might be traps. I, a little pissed off, calmly explained that we previously encountered traps in that same building. Even something so small as us mishearing something the DM said would set them off. And out-of-game stuff wasn't even off the table. They shamed me for not having a dice tray to roll my dice in, because that, quote, couldn't be them. They would also, out of game, talk about how incredible their character was, which I get, because D&D characters are pretty badass. However, when we talked about our own characters, or made drawings of them, which we all loved sharing with one another, X would critique us about our characters, and even our drawing abilities. I can't tell you how many times they told me I was, quote, improving when sharing my character designs with everyone. But when they showed us their drawings, they expected a round of applause. I feel like our DM might be having a hard time dealing with some of this, as X is their friend. I love D&D and our DM, but X's behavior is making it hard to enjoy. I'm unsure of what to do from here. I feel like perhaps I'm overreacting, and I'm worried that flat out talking to X about their behavior will make things worse. It sounds to me like X has in real life main character syndrome, where everything they are and do is the absolute best, and everyone else is inferior. Or, in plainer terms, a narcissist. I think that OP talking to X directly may not be the best option here. I would say to talk to the other players and the DM about X's behavior, and try to come up with a plan to talk to him as a group about how his behavior is making the game not fun for everyone else at the table, in and out of game. Hopefully, X would be receptive and apologetic about it, and would work to improve their behavior. If not, it may then be time to consider removing him from the group, which I understand may be hard for the DM to do, since they are friends. But then, if the DM doesn't want to, I would consider leaving the group if X's behavior is that disruptive and makes the game unenjoyable. Remember, no D&D is better than bad D&D. And if you really don't want to stop playing the game, there will always be online groups to look into. Though, that is just my opinion. What advice would you give OP here? On to the next post. Dungeon Master calls me a slur and kicks me from the group after I, a male, imitate a woman's voice. By Reddit user KindBass7427. This story is from a few weeks back. I signed up for an online campaign, and as part of Session 0, each player had to read out a short passage of fiction to show that we would be comfortable with roleplay. That actually isn't that bad of an idea if you want to run a roleplay heavy game. I just picked a random book off of my bookshelf, which turned out to be Death or Glory, one of the Caiaphas Cain books. Now, for anyone unfamiliar with the Cain books, they are told from the first-person viewpoint of one Commissar Caiaphas Cain, reluctant hero of the Imperium. The writing, however, is filled with footnotes written by his sort of girlfriend, Amberly Vale, an inquisitor of the Ordo Xenos. I decided to read a passage from fairly early on in the book. I used my ordinary voice for Kane's narration, and did my best to do different voices for each character. Anyway, things were going fine, but then I got to one of the footnotes. I did a fairly decent, in my opinion, impression of Penelope Rollins, who does Amberly for the audiobooks. But after a couple of sentences, the Dungeon Master interrupted me. "You an F-slur or something?" "Excuse me?" "Why are you doing a woman's voice?" "Because the character providing the footnotes is a woman." At this point, I was getting ready to leave, but the Dungeon Master beat me to it and kicked me from the server. Well, not like I would want to play with him anyway, after that. Now, OP seemed like the perfect player for what that Game Master was looking for. Role-playing to the point of doing different voices, and even trying to do a more softer tone for the woman character. But apparently, this Game Master was a dick, and such a homophobe, that he kicked OP just for doing a woman's voice. Well, like OP said, nothing of value was lost that day. Let's move on to today's final story. I quote one DnD with luck spells, and now I feel bad. By Reddit user Cold Iron V13. So my group is rather large, and has been playing for about 10 months now. Most of us are experienced, but we have had a new guy join us about 6 months ago. We will call him Rookie. He's a nice guy, but he's not much for reading. Like, I still have to remind him of what his druid can do, or he just casts Shillelagh and goes into melee. About 2 months back, he decided he wanted to try running Spelljammer. The rest of us take this as a sign that he's finally going to take things seriously and learn the rules. Nope. He basically railroads us through the game and throws magic items at us like it's Christmas. He even states that he wants us to break the game and do anything we want. I decided I want to control the dice and make a divination wizard with the luck feat and silvery barbs as my favorite spell. I don't even take any big damage spells because I wanted to be a fate-bending support character. I explained this to Rookie and he gives the okay. Now, we are about 6 to 7 sessions into the game, and the Game Master is starting to be more hostile. This might be because of a new player that was added to the group that can be disruptive, but is overall a good guy. Anyway, he has what I assume to be a boss character teleport onto our ship, give a speech, and begin a fight. She comes in solo and starts fighting. We start swinging, as I notice that the spellcasting character somehow has an AC higher than 22, and has yet to roll anything lower than an 18, even with my spells forcing rerolls. Rookie starts complaining about it being 6v1, even though we have yet to get more than half spell damage onto this character. He then says the boss we are fighting casts a summoning spell, and summons a quote golem that is an exact duplicate of the boss. This is when I realize that he has gone full adversary Game Master. The fight is looking bad for us because of the suspiciously high rolls, but I have an ace up my sleeve in the form of a nat 1 portent die, and grease prepared. My turn comes up, and I announce my spell. We then spend about 5 minutes explaining the spell and arguing about how it's placed and such. Somehow, Rookie was convinced that a 10-foot box was going to hit everyone who was in melee range, which included 2 of our guys and his 2 bad guys in a formation that I would describe as the T-piece from Tetris. Anyway, after arguing size and shape, we then argue position, saying that I could place it so half of it is off the side of our Spelljammer. He says no, I can't do that. I'm getting so tired of this, so I say fine, and I place the spell so it hits his guys and one of ours. I then explain the spell and say that I use Portent to make him roll a 1 for the save. He says no, that he doesn't want to, and that I can't use my ability. I say, quote, "Seriously? This is how you want to play it, dude?" And he basically plays master and victim, pointing out that he's the DM and can do whatever he wants, and that it's so unfair because it's 6v1 again. I decided I had enough of him and start packing my stuff up, saying that if that's how he wants to run his game, then I don't want to take part. He starts throwing a fit, saying how I hate him, and it's not his fault that he doesn't know the rules. Well, I mean, it kinda is. And how he's outnumbered, eventually tossing the books and storming out, leaving the rest of us stunned. It looks like he won't be back, which is awkward because we work at the same place. But I feel like I could have handled things better on my end, such as waiting until the session was over to say I wasn't going to take part in his game anymore, or something. I don't think this is an, quote, "am I the a-hole" situation, but I still feel like, as the more experienced gamer, I could have set a better example somehow. TLDR, new player wants to DM without reading the rules and gets mad when I try to force him to fail a save. Man, talk about an overreaction to a player doing what their character was built for. I agree with OP that Newbie became a DM versus player dungeon master when he was likely fudging rolls, and had that enemy teleport another version of themselves onto the battlefield. Now, could OP have handled the situation a bit better? Sure. But for Newbie to say that what he says goes in regards to not letting OP use his Nat 1 Portent die, and then that it's not his fault that he doesn't know the rules. Like, dude. Newbie throwing a fit and then throwing the books and storming out of the game is not on OP at all. Though it is a shame that Newbie is going to let this experience ruin a friendship. Perhaps OP can talk to Newbie at work and talk things over, to the point where Newbie sees how much of a child he was being, and can come back to the gaming group, and this time actually learning the rules. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I really do appreciate all of you who watch and like my videos, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.